Well, this has been a long time coming. The 212th men are back. I'm Rob Taylor. He's George Bottomley. The last time we were in your ears was the Ashes recap. So we've had a nice long break, haven't we? We've had a few holidays. Where have you been?
I don't think I've been on holiday since.
Oh, all right. I've been to Amsterdam, Portugal. A lot happening around the world, isn't there, since the last podcast?
Yes. I think way back when in the first ever episode.
Yeah.
We were talking about world crises, and they continue.
Yeah, we're in the midst of a World Cup in India. We've obviously took a little bit of break from podcasting for personal reasons. The Ashes was quite draining, wasn't it? And then cricket in general is quite draining, actually, you find, isn't it? And you only have to look at schedules and fixture lists. They come thick and fast. But we're here on a Saturday morning. We've got the England versus South Africa, kind of squeaky bum time for England. You feel like it's now or never. Yeah. How have you found the tournament so far, Bob?
I don't think it's a patch on the 2019 tournament, and that's not from a bias of us winning it and it being in England. I just think in general, most of the grounds have been half empty at best.
Yeah.
At the start of the tournament, and there's not been, up until the last couple of days, there's not been that many kind of competitive matches or shocks. I thought that Afghanistan played brilliantly against England. That was actually quite an enjoyable England defeat, if you can have one, to see the level that Afghanistan played at. And then Netherlands beating South Africa was obviously a really good game in terms of going back to back now. I think they did that in the T20 World Cup in a year's back's time. And then, doing it again.
Must have been good for that Netherlands team, because if you look at the team, the breakdown is majority. I'm not being offensive by saying this. A lot of that team are born in South Africa. Of course, there's sort of hereditary ties there, isn't there, between the two countries?
Man of the match was Van der Merwe.
Yeah.
I think.
He's crazy, isn't he?
And he obviously played for South Africa until...
Yeah. So obviously, it's one thing we always say World Cup's highlight is that it's associate nations get the platform to sort of impress, which is good. My view on India, this tournament, very self-indulgent. It's felt quite political. I think I agree with you, like the grounds have been half empty. I mean, you say that India-Pakistan obviously always gets that huge crowd in. I was listening to another podcast and they was talking about why that might be. A lot of people saying that, during the week, Indian schedule, people who are working can't quite get to the grounds. They talk about the size of some of these grounds. We know Ahmedabad is 130,000, 140,000. And with that, obviously, a ground that is half full will look empty on the to the eye on the television. I don't think orange seats help. They can sometimes sort of highlight that. But I think and I once heard something when this was back when the IPL was on. The Indians are very focused on the Indian team, and they're a very individual fandom base supporting group. They love individuals. They come to see Kohli. They come to see Rohit. So when you've got maybe Afghanistan versus the Netherlands, naturally it doesn't pull in a big crowd commercially and
I don't know
across India.
I'm not sure who said it, but there's a quote that sticks in my head of India isn't a country that loves cricket. It loves Indian cricket. And I think you can see that in this tournament. I do think that the BCCI and the ICC, whoever's most responsible for it, should have a level of criticism pointed in their direction, in the sense that I was watching the Wisdom podcast a few days back, and you actually couldn't buy tickets at the moment for the England-India game.
Why is that? Why is it so difficult to buy tickets?
My conspiracy theory is that the IPL would do very well if tournaments like this cease to exist.
Well, it does. That kind of feels like the way of the tournament, isn't it? I mean, the big factor, you can look at, from an English perspective, be disappointed with the performance, but at the end of the day, there's been so little of this form actually played. And I can't believe the drop-off of integrity and intensity since when this tournament was last played. I actually recall when England were on course to, win the World Cup at home, ODI cricket was still at a pretty good place. I think it was still, largely respected. I think India themselves have been the sort of cheerleader for this format. When I think of ODIs, I've said this all the time, I think of like nights in India and full crowds and, sky blue shirts, all over the stadiums like you see here. And since then, it's sort of the influx of franchise leagues has really, bulldoze this kind of bilateral fixture out the way. And we're all in a situation now where it feels a little bit thrown together. And, India look, rightly strong on home turf, and I get that. But when I've watched England and Australia and even elements like when South Africa are playing the Netherlands, there seems to be a real lack of tact and a real sense of we don't really know how we used to play this kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think particularly I think England and Australia are probably the two sides that look most fatigued and probably just rolling out the old guard in many ways. How did we used to do it? Right, well, let's pick that side, and they might, find a way of how they used to play way back when. England have struggled. Australia have struggled. Pakistan don't look like a particularly strong side. South Africa obviously started like a house on fire and then had a hiccup against the Netherlands.
With Pakistan, I think that they almost look like the child that's just been told off too many times, and now they're a bit sulky. They've been practically, let's be honest, not been made very welcome here, have they? So I think that's in the head a little bit. That could have had the reverse effect, but they seem a little bit demotivated, I think.
Yeah, they have injuries, don't they, in the bowling stocks, which obviously I feel like your bowlers are the ones that win your 50-over tournaments, really. You can have the best batting side in the world, but particularly in India, if you can't take wickets, you're probably not going to get into...
Going back to the stadium, did you see that piece of debris fly out? I think it was Lucknow.
Yeah.
And landed on I think it was an Afghanistan game.
Yeah.
And luckily the crowd was quite sparse, but that could have really hurt someone.
The one game that really kind of I thought was strange was the India-Pakistan. And the bit that really got me was at the end when India won, fireworks went off as if it was the final. And I haven't seen fireworks go off for any other win.
Yeah. They got that flare at Old Trafford, haven't they? That flame.
Yeah, but in this tournament, I haven't seen any fireworks for any other win. And it just felt like a bit of a weird game in general. But
do you know, I've got Indian colleagues in the office, and they're very light-hearted towards the Pakistan-India rivalry. It's not as intense as the media makes it out there, But they always say that when you grow up in India and you watch TV programs, so, if you were relating this to something like Marvel, the sort of plot is always the superhero hero Indian and the villain Pakistani. So the rhetoric amongst all these games is to overcome evil and to win there. And obviously that's a chart, like a chapter full of history we could go back into there. But it is really that intense, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a big rival. My great shame about this tournament is that I think if you spoke to anybody who wasn't a die-hard cricket fan and told them that there was a Cricket World Cup on,
it can pass you by a bit, can't it?
Won't have a clue. And it's not really, I think any World Cup, whether it be a football World Cup, the Rugby World Cup's obviously on at the moment, and we have the Cricket World Cup as well.
Yeah.
This hardly feels like a showcase of the sport.
Yeah.
Where your neutrals will tune in and watch these big rivalries play out.
I was in Portugal and I was with Callum Parkinson actually. Obviously been on the show before. I was loosely following the game, as you do through your phone. And England were really up against Afghanistan. And then when they concluded it, we were speaking about this. We were saying we almost like wrote it off as like, oh, it's India, isn't it? We don't prosper in this side of the world. Yeah. Almost like there's a sense of like, we write it off because I don't know. I feel like as Brits, our attitude towards India is almost a little bit like it's territory that, stay in our lane. We know that the team's suited better to us in these conditions, that maybe the IPL sort of, dilutes our view of how successful we can be at cricket here. We never particularly tore well there. So I don't think the expectation, I was hopeful that, I still had England's favourites, but I think in the back of my mind, there was still that kind of thing as, as good as this team can be, there'll be teams better suited to us.
Yeah, the two teams that are out absolute front runners at the moment and probably look like final favourites are India, who have such a idyllic balance really when it comes to playing in this conditions with the two spinners, Jadeja, Kuldeep, and then Pandya really giving that kind of all-rounder that England are missing with the absence of Stokes' bowling. And then New Zealand, They've got it all. They've got a really nice balance.
They are a little bit like becoming on the board of irritating to me, New Zealand, with this nice guy persona kind of thing. I feel like we all spend so much time saying how much nice people they are that we kind of almost to the point where they go under the radar and they beat us. I think we need to just accept, yes, they're nice people, but they're also a good cricket team.
Class players,
and a well-travelled team as well. Teams that, a lot of players have played a lot in this country. You think of Bolt, you think of some of the batsmen, that regularly picked up for IPL, franchises. And what I will say is that had they not won that game against England, they still have had quite a good run in terms they've played a lot of the teams that you'd expect to beat, your Afghanistans, your Netherlands, that kind of thing. So that was a huge win against England. It really set them on the path to projecting themselves into what looks like now them in India as clear semi-finalists, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then the best of the rest will be between Australia, South Africa, Pakistan, England.
Yeah. The weary three.
Yes.
Or the weary four. Yeah.
This is a must-win game for England today.
Yeah. Just if you just tuned in now, we're watching the England versus South Africa game. England have chosen to field first. A couple of injuries that have been picked up here, Bot, you said?
Yes, Topley's got injured, hasn't he? And then Rashid's ill, apparently. I think what
just sort of, I guess, before we come on to this, what's your assessment of England so far? Because obviously it's, they've lost 2 games already. It's not ideal. They've had the banana skin that they tend to have in tournaments in India with Afghanistan. What have you made of? Not to sort of dissect it. I don't think England are not out yet, and they could turn this round. But where have you sort of, if you could give me a bit of a synopsis of what you've found so far, and then I'll give you my 2 pennies worth.
I think in 2019 we saw that it's very hard to go back-to-back Ashes and World Cup. They obviously won the 2019 World Cup and then struggled in the 2019 Ashes, got a draw, but it was by the skin of the teeth, really, that draw, wasn't it? It's very hard to back up one after the other, and I think we're seeing the reverse of that this year. Is had a decent Ashes, played a certain style, and have come into the World Cup probably with that on the back burner, not really the priority. Playing second string 11s versus Ireland, kind of bringing Stokes back into the fold at the last minute. And the big question for me is this England side over the hill, or is it just a lack of kind of form and interest?
Interest is the big word for me. I think so many of this team, Bairstow, Wood, Root, Stokes, obviously, of course, are going to be so consumed by this Bazball and this sort of test environment that they've successfully created. And there's a massive shout that England are as good as anyone in the world in that format now, the way they've risen themselves. And it's whether they see this as a bit of a chore. Butler is a much desired player, in my view, and I'm pretty sure you share this view. England's best ever white ball player. Yeah. But there was things mooted before this tournament where, and I think even did Josh Butler say it himself, where he says after this tournament, a few of us have got a few decisions to make.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's whether
strange thing to say before a tournament, isn't it?
It is, but is it just the first sign of sort of? Well, it's not the first sign, but is it because Butler's raised this before? I think after the T20 World Cup when they were made to have a pointless bilateral series against Australia. Yeah. Is it kind of just another hint that this is kind of becoming a bit of a piss take now?
Yeah,
we won the World T20 World Cup last year, and now we've got a World Cup in India, 50 over.
I think, yeah, it is a shame because I think that
and more importantly, have you seen that kind of disinterested mindset from other teams? Because I've sensed it in Australia a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose that goes again with the backing up the Ashes in the World Cup in the same year. I think in 2019, Australia didn't have a particularly good World Cup showing pre-Ashes. You can't focus on both, it feels. Having them in the same year is tough for both sides to follow up, particularly, I suppose, the Australia side is pretty much the Test side. If you think Warner, Smith...
Well, that was my problem. I put a tweet on our socials and just said, does everyone else not find it a bit samey? Yeah. Warner opening, Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, that kind of thing. Stoinis there. I was for a country with the depth Australia has, I'd love to have seen them flex more people in this team. Josh Inglis has got a gig, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But it's a bit apathetic, isn't it? I mean, I remember when the last World Cup was on, and Australia sort of shrugged their shoulders a bit and thought, we've not really put any energy into this format. And England it feels like England are in that funk now.
It feels like there's a lot of sides going through the motions for the inevitable India win.
And India, it's kind of just a coming of age thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's been dubbed by many as kind of in tandem with obviously the direction of the country economically, the rise of India, as becoming a real, political force.
And I suppose staying away from too much geopolitics, but thinking just purely from a political landscape in cricket itself, India kind of run the game now with the IPL. They have the power. This is a white ball tournament. They are white ball dominant. They're putting on a show in the way that they'd like to put on a show, and they probably will win and should win it.
They're all signals of intent, and Yas Rana made a really good point on the Wisdom podcast. We tune into that a lot, don't we? He was saying that it was very, very the win against Bangladesh, the latter stages of that, where Kohli was on 85 and I think they needed 15. It was kind of a little bit too staged, and you even questioned Bangladesh's integrity around this, where a few wides were being bowled, and and Kohli itself, it seemed to be like it's almost like, even to take a little bit of pressure off Virat, it's almost a case of he needs to do this for the value of the country and what they expect. I don't class Kohli as a selfish person. I actually think he's a wonderful, ambassador for the game, but almost where he realizes that him making a century is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that don't sit great with me. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, KL Rahul's patting him back. I didn't see the end of this match.
Where do you feel about that personally?
And then there was the Richard Kettleborough non-wide, where I think one of the Bangladeshis bowled a wide, but would have stopped Kohli's chance of getting 100.
Yeah.
So he didn't give it as a wide. I don't want to. You could sound very curmudgeonly here.
Yeah.
But
it makes me think: is it India's game, or are they just letting us play?
Yeah. And should an international umpire be behaving in that manner? Now, again, in some ways, it's a bit of a laugh, and it's part of the romance and the comedy of the game. Just
they were going to clearly win, weren't they? There was no threat to India not messing this up at the sake of allowing Kohli to convert this century.
However, I do think it's strange when a world-class tournament, a World Cup, the pinnacle of the sport, we're kind of laughing and saying, "Oh, I won't get a wide, you can get a century." But that could sound very grumpy, I do admit. From an England perspective, the one thing that's really got me about this England side is the lack of balance with Stokes' injury. We just cannot get the balance right in this side. No,
and we've been. I sort of had Sam Curran set up as this player where, because he plays so much IPL, because the value that he went for in the IPL, if people don't remember, I think he was one of the most expensive players, wasn't he? Yeah. And look, real handful in the T20 World Cup.
Yeah, man, he was player of the season.
I always said, as English fans, as English men, do we underappreciate the skill and how this man is portrayed around the world?
Yeah.
And I had high hopes in this tournament that he could be the same, but he's really not risen to it, has he?
I must admit, I didn't see this coming.
You did, or
didn't see it coming?
But you expected him to perform?
I thought Curran would perform. I didn't expect him
by the way, if England somehow beat South Africa today, he still might flourish. But from what we can only go off what we've seen so far, right?
Yeah, I didn't expect him to have the lack of penetration that he's had, particularly in the middle overs. With the bat, he seems at one space too high at 7 in 50 over stuff. He is a good hitter of the ball, but he's not kind of a lad who gives you long innings, is he really?
No.
And then Livingston at 6 always felt very high to me. He's a handy player, like his bowling particularly, but it does feel a little bit, when I've watched England in this tournament, a bit like the dark ages before the pre-Morgan.
With Livingston, and I'm sure Livingston's a great bloke, and he's a very, very talented cricketer. But when we when we've done various interviews with journalists, that they've described this well. That people say T20 is exciting, hitting sixes. That's what everyone wants. That's what the youth wants these days. But you gave the different perspective of we're just seeing Klassen hit some beautiful cover drives. Really times the ball well, doesn't he? There's another romance to this game which can be aesthetically appeasing when watching batsmen. And with Livingston, I always find it's a little bit swing from the hip. And maybe it's just me. I don't love that style of batting. It's great when it comes off, but I find myself quite frustrated, which has happened a lot of the times. And you just mentioned maybe he's a place too high.
Yeah.
It's kind of been a bit like, was it necessary?
Yeah.
And then, and the fact that he can bowl a bit of useful spin, makes his place in this side quite merited.
Yeah.
But,
I think
that's just how I feel a bit about it. You might not agree,
No, I think they've got a real issue with Stokes' injury. If Stokes could bowl, and you have either Moeen Ali or Liam Livingstone at 7, you've probably got the perfect balance that you go Bairstow, Milan opening at the top. Root and Stokes can do that job of ticking it over in the middle overs.
Yeah.
Butler and Brook are your finishers at 5 and 6. And then you've got someone like Livingstone as a finisher or Ali as a finisher, swinging from the hip at 7. And then you can go with 4 best bowlers of whoever that may be. It's probably Wood, Rashid, and Topley, and one other. But without Stokes' bowling, you are trying to get, like we see it in this match now, we've gone with the 5 bowlers and Root. You're therefore having to bowl a lot of Root, and good teams, particularly if you think about India's play of spin, or potentially Pakistani and Sri Lanka play of spin, they will be able to take Root down if you have 5 bowlers aren't having a good day and you have to bowl a lot of Root. So it is just that injury, and I suppose it's
a sign of an aging bowling attack, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a sign of an aging team. Look, they're all well over 30. This team, who's under 30? Atkinson, Curran.
It's like when we blooded like a younger team against Ireland, and there was a lot to like about about some of the young lads that bowled in there, and it's just too little, too late, and we just not had the amount of ODI fixtures to sort of trial these people. The only way you can do, there's been a lot said about Atkinson about how he's got like 30 overs to his name in international cricket. That's kind of not his fault, you know what I mean? It's just the way that if this format had its prevalence, then there's a good chance we can. So for everybody, this tournament's been a bit of a mashup, hasn't it? Throw what you've got, because Indians play so much cricket, and the team is probably got the best depth in the world. They are likely to be the better off for it. I just want to touch on Chris Wilkes, because he's been kind of, the minute he underperforms, people talk about almost like a pizza, like a delivery pizza that's had to go like an hour, doesn't travel that well. Not comparing Chris Wilkes to pizza, but he, I find myself more inclined to support Chris Wilkes from what he's done in the summer to what he's done for England than I care about this tournament. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. A stellar performance in the Ashes from Chris Wilkes means a lot more.
It's difficult to sort of come down heavy on him, isn't it?
Yeah. And
by the way, we talking about Livingston, all these players, we are very much aware this podcast is being recorded during a fixture where all these players, might come to fruition. But it's just the risk we take, isn't it?
I don't think any of them are playing. Livingston's not playing.
Right, fair enough.
And Wilkes can play. So we're all right. We're safe there. But equally, it's a long tournament. I have a sneaky suspicion that England are trying to get into the semi-finals by hook or by crook, and then they might bring Archer in.
You think?
I think
they've teased us, haven't they, with social media pictures?
He's gone out there, hasn't he? Now.
Yeah. He had his headphones in and doing a bit of running and stuff like that.
And to be honest, if you had a bowling lineup of Rashid, Topley, Wood, Archer,
can we get 3 or 4 overs out of him? You'd want him to do the 10, though, wouldn't you?
You need him to do the 10, yeah. I'd say.
So whether his pace is up, I mean, I keep saying it. All this elbow injury that he's got, if that's what's holding him back still, I'm guessing it is. It's where the majority of his pace would come from, right?
Yeah. Well, when he came back
in the South Africa tournament, the franchise tournament, playing for Cape Town or Pearl, was it?
He still had his pace.
Yeah.
Who was he playing for? I don't know. I think he was playing for Cape Town. Cape Town MI, wasn't he?
Yeah.
he still had his pace then, but obviously didn't have the strength to kind of get through the tournament.
Yeah.
Morgan has said that it would be an unwanted risk to bring him back for this World Cup, and they shouldn't do it. And in general, I think that is true. Like, if we ever want him to play Test cricket again, you don't want to rush him back. I don't see him playing Test cricket again, if I'm really honest with myself. Then he becomes, how much 50 over cricket are we going to play now on?
I don't really want to say. Well, I think it's just the writing's on the wall. I think we'll have this World Cup, and I'd be very surprised. I think they've already is it South Africa, the next ODI World Cup that's been scheduled? Might be wrong. Might be some hearsay that I heard.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be very surprised if, well, even that tournament goes ahead, or at the very least, that's the last ever one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the head of the ICC's already said that his proposal and plan is that for this tournament will still exist, but in order to navigate the schedules around franchise leagues, that ODI is the next cow to the abattoir.
Yeah.
ODI bilaterals, and it can't. I can't. We've heard this on other podcasts. It's very difficult if you know your cricket and you're aware of the climate to disagree with that, isn't it?
That was the head of the MCC. It was Mark Nicholas.
Yes.
Taking over. He says he's going to get rid of. Oh, he's going to move to get rid of bilateral.
I'll tell you what, it's a good job for the boys, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they all get a go, don't they?
Yeah.
Bertus de Jong actually was pretty scathing of that, and said, "Do you know, 50 over cricket really helps the associate nations develop."
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen some really good performances already in this tournament from the associate nations. I think that this is more
helps them in what the fact that they're doing more than just T20, so they could transition to a Test nation if they wanted to.
And the growth of the kind of cricketing ability, without sounding too patronising, but developing the skills, playing longer formats. I think from a revenue stream, actually, it gets them much better access to playing the bigger nations and making money from it. I might be completely butchering his point here, but in general, it is a very important format for the associate nations.
What's your view on the format? Because I've had friends say to me that whether it's just because it's not been on the screens, it's not been in our faces, a real lack of, sort of interest towards ODI. Yeah. Where do you sit with it? And I'll tell you my view.
I prefer this tournament, although this tournament I don't think has been run well and hasn't been the most interesting tournament of 50 over cricket. Mm-hmm. I prefer this to the World T20. I think that you get better games the longer the games are. That is what the classic cricket fan would say. But, like England have had a great start to this innings. Then they've had a bad period. Then they've taken some wickets. You get those peaks
and troughs. Yeah. Ebbs and flows. Yeah. We're throwing them all here, aren't we?
Yeah. But if it's going to be an empty stadiums, then what's the point?
Yeah. I mean,
what do you reckon?
I've still got like you. I've still got time for this format. I think I like the contest of bat and ball and not just the squashbuckling. How many can I score for limited time? I think this has been a high scoring tournament, so you can still have all the shots you want to see, the 6s and 4s, and I think there's been a few conservative totals, hasn't there, in the 200s and things like that. I think Australia have took it back to the 90s a few times with Labuschagne and Smith, haven't they? But all in all, there's still been, lots of shots on display. And I think that,
one thing I would say about this tournament that's been a real positive is the different types of pitches that it's been played on. There are really small grounds in India. There are big grounds in India. There's pacey wickets, good batting wickets, good spin wickets. That's a good side of this tournament.
Well, look, it's almost like mini test matches, isn't it? That's how I've always viewed ODIs. It's what, if you follow village cricket, majority of them are 40, 50 overs. So it's kind of been like the go-to a game of cricket. You know what I mean? I've really, not portrayed that particularly well, but it's still allowing to see good batting techniques. You see more of bowlers because they get more overs. You have to fit people in, a little bit differently. Whereas T20, there's everyone sometimes gets to go as more of an emphasis all round. You still get to see specialists in full flow for longer periods of the game. I've still got a lot of time for it, but sadly, it seems to be the one that's been shoved to one side amongst all the, domestic and international cricket focuses.
Yeah. So did you hear about Tendulkar's proposal?
Go on.
Splitting up into 225 over innings.
What, so like a test match kind of thing?
Yeah, he says that he came up with this idea in like the early 2000s when he was still playing. And in some ways, it's condition led. So he thinks that the dew can be a real factor in places like India, that if you bat first and bowl second, you're really at a disadvantage because the dew allows the ball to come on, takes your spinner's potency out of the game. And he also says that in general, it would create a better match, a more interesting match where you wouldn't have those kind of.
Is that everyone the biggest sort of what do you say, criticism of ODI cricket is 30 overs, isn't it? Everyone says that at 30 overs you can get a real. For me, I found that a bit of a lack of patience. Archie Bogle said that. He said when he's done his commentary, one of his biggest times where he struggled is in that period. But I think you've got to kind of appreciate that, and that's if you're a Test cricket lover. You'll be well aware of that there are dead periods, aren't there?
So finally on his point is, so it wouldn't be 2 innings of 25 where you would have 10 wickets in both innings, if that makes sense. You would have 10 wickets across the 225. So, for example, if you batted your first 25 and you were 180 for 5, you'd start your first 25 at 180 for 5.
Right.
So it's more trying to manage the conditions and the dew and stuff. So, I don't know. Maybe there's a point to that in
something's got to give though in the next 4 years. I think we're going to see some huge changes.
Yeah.
Okay. While we're doing a kind of not a live podcast but a recap, as I said, we're watching England versus South Africa. England had bowled first. We were about how many overs are we in here, Bot? Just over 30.
3.
Yeah, 225 for 3. You'd say at this point, South Africa are on for a sizable total here, aren't they? Big batting team, aren't they? Lots of runs in the team. We've talked about England's frailties with balance and bowling. You said by hook, by crook. I believe if England are going to, just to go back on swing a little bit, if England are going to beat teams, they have the ability to outbat them. So maybe they've made the peace with that. I mean, David Willey's bowling now. And they make the peace of whatever we can get, we can chase it down.
Yeah, they've got 6 really good batsmen, obviously, in this kind of balance. And Willey at 7 is very high for Willey. I expected him to go with this balance, but I've Livingston at 7, maybe Willey at 8.
For me, it's how they start. It's the openers, isn't it? If you can get Bairstow and Milan off to a flyer, Butler's probably due a score, isn't he? Get Root to tick you over in that 30 to, that 20 to 30 over. Then you can let your Livingstons and the what's to come really get you up to the high totals.
If England are going to qualify, they're going to need 5 or 6 wins.
Yeah.
Probably 5.
Yeah.
And net run rate.
Yeah.
We've got 1 win so far. Where you're getting your 4 other wins.
I thought we were impressive against Bangladesh. That's where I thought a little bit like, we're still here, that kind of thing.
Where are you getting your 4 other wins from?
You've made it hard for yourself. You've just got to beat anything that's in front of you now, haven't you, really?
You've got to win today, South Africa.
Yeah.
You've got Sri Lanka. You should win that.
Can be a bit of a bogey team for England, can't it?
Netherlands, you've got to win that.
I expect us to win that.
Who else? Have we got any other minnows?
No.
And then you've got to beat one of Pakistan.
Australia. Yeah.
Australia beating Pakistan last night has really evened it up.
And
if England win today, you've got South Africa.
And they're going to beat South Africa.
South Africa, Pakistan, Australia, England are all on 4 points.
Yeah.
So then really to absolutely guarantee you've got to go and beat Australia and Pakistan.
Yeah.
And try and take wins off. You've got to win all your games, haven't you, really?
Yeah. I want to talk about South Africa because we've, for years, sort of tee them up to be a declining cricket board.
Yeah.
I actually want to say this because I tweeted this again. I'm so impressed with Graham Smith. I actually do believe, and we can criticize franchise tournaments and talk about how they're swallowing up our beloved international game, but I think South Africa as a country are buoyant off the back of their tournament.
Yeah.
A sense of a freshness in the system. I look at they've now, they've got a really good balance now between bat and ball to the point where they look one of the tournament's strongest sides. Yeah. And I don't think you would have anticipated that, would you?
No.
From the last World Cup. Just, we think about how outside of the big three, cricket boards can prosper. They're building a nice template here.
Yeah.
Welcomed IPL investment, big crowds. Maybe just struck a little bit of love back into the tournament from locals. It's hard to sort of, we probably need a good couple of years to sort of really assess how much impact this has made. But they're certainly a match for England now.
Yeah, they're a great side in terms of, you could say, the Cox world class. Clarson's probably got himself into a bit of a world.
He's played some brilliant shots in it already.
Miller's a brilliant finisher, and then the bowlers Janssen and Guidi,
Rabada,
Norkie is obviously injured at the moment. And then you've got
Klassen,
Maharaj and Shamsi.
There's depth there, isn't there?
There's balance, there's depth. Yeah, they've done well. I don't think everyone can copy what they've done in terms of IPL investment, because otherwise it kind of cannibalizes itself, doesn't it? I think they've been the first mover on that approach, and they've definitely benefited from it.
I know they had a slip up against Netherlands, but on the whole, they look fresh. They look up for it. They look streaky. Whereas I look at us and we look hobbly. We look injured. We look a bit jaded. Yeah. There's not. I always found Owen Morgan's sides, fit and ready and hungry about it. You
needed a bit more. We're going straight back into England there, but you needed a little bit more of an injection of youth into it. Obviously, Atkinson's bowled well today.
Brooks obviously come into it.
Brooks come into it. People like Bryden Carr's taking over the Plunkett job, maybe even Rehan Ahmed being in the squad, pushing the other spinners. You've only got 15 players, it's hard. The one that I think is an absolute cock-up and should have been in the squad is Will Jacks. To play that Jason Roy roll up at the top of the innings and give you a bowling option with spin.
Yeah.
I think that was a big oversight, really.
I just think if it's a toss-up between us and Australia. One of us is just going to bomb further. The other one's going to get through by the skin of the teeth, and then you just can't really see past India, can you?
South Africa could capitulate. Pakistan could do anything.
Yeah, they South Africa. Them two are quite similar. Is they are literally, like you say, a game away from capitulation, like we've seen.
Who could out of the others then?
I always laugh at when Ireland beat Pakistan and Inzamam Hut's so dismayed, or like looking at all the folks going on. And there's a lot of Irish fans in the crowd. That was really good. I wish Ireland were playing. I miss Ireland. Papua New Guinea, get them all in.
The next tournament's 14 teams, which is good.
I know, and that's what I think the T20 tournament was probably, if you look at it, better than this in Australia, because you saw more associate. The associate nations are all part of the fun, aren't they? Yeah. And then, just to finish up, because we'll probably wrap things up soon. Did you hear about the Olympics?
Yes, yeah.
So the Olympics is up. There's a few sports up for grabs. I think it's netball, squash, and cricket.
Right.
And it'd be fair to say that cricket is the strongest of those three sports from a global perspective. We've had a wicket, but the committee of the Olympics held a meeting in India, to discuss those three sports. Right. I don't want to talk about leverage or anything here, but I think we might see cricket at the next Olympics. Which, when we've done our research and we've discussed subjects, biggest topics, as this banner says, we looked at the money you can receive from the Olympics, can't you?
It was Tim Wigmore, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Our first ever interview who talked about that.
It was the pull of China, wasn't it?
Yeah. If you got the Olympics into cricket into the Olympics, the amount of funding that people get from their national Olympic committees is huge and would grow the game even further.
I don't think I'm physically ready to see us lose to someone like Mexico or Argentina. I'm not a rugby man, but I always perplexed at how Argentina have become good at rugby, and people tell me they've always been good.
Yeah.
The sides like Romania and stuff like that. It does actually. It's an eye opener when you get these teams in tournaments, isn't it? And it makes it so much more fun. The banana skins are the best. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So of the others outside of the ones that we've been talking about, who do you reckon could sneak a semi-final? So I'm
looking at it now. Should we just sort of write New Zealand and India off? So it might happen, it might not. But right now, I think they'd be a safe bet to be through.
And who's most likely to be the other two? Start there.
I don't think it's us, and I'm an optimistic guy. I think you're looking at. I think Australia are blossoming a little bit now in this tournament. Australia could sneak a spot. And then, I don't know. I think,
I think the four most likely are, I think Australia.
Sri Lanka are done, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. If South Africa win this, I think they're pretty much through.
If England win this,
Yeah, I think I'd be wary. I think we could beat Pakistan. I'm worried against us versus the Aussies.
Yeah,
And
let's see.
Bangladesh, Netherlands, Afghanistan all have 2 points. I'd love to see Afghanistan sneak into the semis.
It'd be actually. Do you know what? Like you said, they were really good value for their win against us, weren't we?
Imagine if Afghanistan beat India in the semis.
Can that happen?
Oh, they can still get the semis.
Goodness me. We're going to leave it here, guys. Thanks for rejoining us again. We're going to get back into the podcasting. There's still plenty of this tournament to go, isn't there? Fail or succeed, we'll still cover it even. But, let's hope England can turn things around.
Yes.
Have you anything to say?
I've got an interview lined up for us in November.
Oh, good.
So I'll talk to you after
the
pod. And let's get back into the swing of things. There's obviously the India Test series in January.
That'll be good, won't it?
Good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
good to be back.
Good to be back.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Catch you soon.